Beneath the concrete, steel, and neon lights of New York City lies a forgotten world. Long before Wall Street tickers or subway trains, before Broadway shows or Times Square crowds, this place was a quiet island of streams, forests, and rolling hills. It was called Mannahatta by the Lenape people, meaning island of many hills. To the Lenape, this was not real estate. It was home, a place of balance, a land filled with fish, oysters, deer, and fertile soil. But history was about to change everything. The first outsiders to truly chart this land came in 1609, when Henry Hudson, an English sailor working for the Dutch East India Company, sailed into the Great Harbor. He was searching for a passage to Asia, but instead found one of the most remarkable natural harbors in the world. Hudson's exploration opened the door to Dutch traders, who quickly realized that the beaver pelts found here could bring immense wealth in Europe. Furs, not gold, would draw empires to this island. The Dutch moved fast. By 1624, they had established a foothold in what they called New Netherland. Their first settlers landed near present-day Albany, but soon they looked south, toward the island at the mouth of the Hudson River. 2 years later, in 1626, Peter Minuit made a transaction that would echo through history. According to records, he purchased Manhattan from the Lenape in exchange for goods valued at around 60 guilders, often later simplified to about $24 worth of trinkets. Of course, the Lenape concept of land ownership was nothing like the Europeans. To them, land could not be sold permanently. It could be shared or used. What the Dutch saw as a legal purchase, the Lenape likely saw as a temporary agreement. This misunderstanding would be the first of many conflicts. Still, the Dutch built their settlement. They called it New Amsterdam. Picture it, a tiny cluster of wooden houses at the southern tip of Manhattan, surrounded by water and forest. There was a small fort, Fort Amsterdam, and muddy lanes that would one day become some of the most famous streets in the world. At this stage, it was not impressive, but its location was everything. The Hudson River opened into the interior of North America. Ships could come and go with ease. Trade routes stretched across the Atlantic. New Amsterdam was perfectly placed to be a hub of commerce. From the beginning, the colony was a patchwork of peoples. Alongside the Dutch came Walloons, Germans, Scandinavians, and a small number of Jewish refugees fleeing persecution in Europe. Africans were brought as slaves, though some managed to gain freedom and even land. This mixture of peoples was unusual for a European colony in the 1600s, and it planted the seed of diversity that would define New York forever. But survival was never guaranteed. The Dutch West India Company, which controlled the colony, cared only for profits. Governors were appointed, but corruption and mismanagement were common. Tensions with the English to the north and south constantly threatened the settlement, and relations with the Lenape deteriorated as Dutch settlers expanded and demanded more land. By the 1640s, these tensions exploded into violence. The most notorious conflict came in 1643, when Governor Willem Kieft launched a brutal attack on nearby Lenape villages. His decision led to years of warfare, known as Kieft's War. Hundreds of Lenape were killed, and the colony itself was nearly destroyed in the retaliations. Many settlers blamed Kieft for the disaster, and eventually he was recalled to the Netherlands. New Amsterdam was fragile, and many wondered if it could survive. Then came Peter Stuyvesant. Arriving in 1647, he was strict, authoritarian, and deeply religious. He had lost a leg in battle, and his wooden peg leg became his symbol. Stuyvesant ruled with an iron hand. He cracked down on disorder, enforced morality, and tried to bring stability. The people often hated his heavy-handedness, but he built lasting structures. He improved defenses, strengthened Fort Amsterdam, and oversaw the construction of schools and churches. He also ordered the building of a wall to protect the northern edge of the town. That wall would eventually become Wall Street, the financial heart of the world. Stuyvesant also faced challenges from within. New Amsterdam was already too diverse and independent to be ruled like a European town. When he tried to enforce religious conformity, he faced petitions from settlers demanding freedom of worship. Though he resisted, the seeds of religious tolerance were planted. New Amsterdam was becoming something different from the rigid colonies elsewhere. But the Dutch grip on New Amsterdam would not last. In 1664, 4 English warships sailed into the harbor. Outnumbered and outgunned, Stuyvesant wanted to fight, but the townspeople refused. They had no desire to see their homes burned for a company that had often neglected them. New Amsterdam surrendered peacefully, and the English renamed it New York, in honor of the Duke of York. Many assumed this was the end of Dutch influence, but in truth, the Dutch spirit remained. Street names, cultural practices, and the habit of tolerance and trade lingered. The English might control the city, but its DNA was forever mixed. In fact, when the Dutch briefly retook the city in 1673, they renamed it New Orange, but just a year later, it returned to English control for good. By then, the colony's identity was already something unique, neither fully Dutch nor fully English. New York grew under English rule, its population expanded, and its harbor became busier each year. But the legacy of its Dutch beginnings shaped everything that followed. The early embrace of diversity, the priority of trade over ideology, and the sheer will to survive repeated crises, these became New York's defining traits.
Here's a little-known truth. If not for Stuyvesant's order, the wall on the northern edge of town, the most famous financial district in the world, might never have existed. If not for the colony's chaos and diversity, New York might have become a provincial English town instead of a global crossroads. And if not for the fur trade that lured the Dutch in the first place, the island might have remained a quiet Lenape home for much longer. By the mid-1700s, New York was no longer the tiny Dutch outpost it had once been. It had become one of the busiest ports in North America, second only to Philadelphia in size and influence. Its population had surged past 20,000 by 1770, with merchants, artisans, enslaved Africans, and immigrants from across Europe filling its narrow streets. Ships crowded its harbor, unloading goods from the Caribbean, England, and Africa. Wealth flowed through the city, but so did inequality and unrest. New York was a city on the edge of something extraordinary, but also something explosive. The colonial city was deeply tied to slavery, a fact often overshadowed by later images of New York as a beacon of freedom. By 1703, more than 40% of households owned enslaved people, the highest proportion outside the southern colonies. Enslaved men and women built roads, hauled goods, and labored in households. In 1711, the city even established a formal slave market at the foot of Wall Street. This dark foundation was part of the city's wealth, and its shadow lingered long after emancipation. New York was also a city of immigrants. Germans, Irish, Scots, Jews, and Huguenots joined the mix, each adding their languages, traditions, and tensions. Taverns echoed with a dozen dialects. Churches of different faiths dotted the streets. The city was a microcosm of diversity, and while this created friction, it also gave New York its restless, dynamic character. As the 18th century wore on, British control tightened. The Crown imposed taxes and trade restrictions, treating the colonies more like sources of revenue than partners in empire. Many New Yorkers, especially wealthy merchants, grew resentful. They saw their profits threatened by British laws like the Navigation Acts, which forced colonial trade to flow through English channels. At the same time, ordinary New Yorkers felt the sting of new taxes without any voice in Parliament. The slogan, "No taxation without representation," found fertile ground here. But New York was divided. Many merchants still depended on trade with Britain and feared the chaos of rebellion. Loyalist sentiment ran strong, and the city would become one of the most contested places in the coming struggle. In 1765, tensions boiled over. That year, Parliament passed the Stamp Act, requiring colonists to pay taxes on printed materials. In New York, angry crowds filled the streets, burning effigies and threatening officials. When British troops arrived to keep order, riots erupted. The city became a flashpoint of resistance, and its taverns and meeting halls buzzed with arguments about liberty and loyalty. By 1776, the break was inevitable. The Continental Congress declared independence, and George Washington brought the Continental Army to New York to defend it against the British. But the city was poorly fortified, and the British were determined to take it. In August, the largest battle of the Revolutionary War unfolded on the fields of Brooklyn. Washington's army was outmaneuvered and forced to retreat across the East River under cover of night. It was a miracle escape, but the city itself was lost. For the rest of the war, New York remained under British control, the crown jewel of their occupation. It became the base for British military and naval operations, a refuge for loyalists, and a prison for captured rebels. Conditions were brutal. Thousands of American prisoners were crammed into ships in the harbor, where disease and starvation killed more soldiers than the battlefield. The city suffered under martial law, its streets filled with soldiers and spies. Then, in September 1776, disaster struck. A massive fire swept through lower Manhattan, destroying nearly one-third of the city. To this day, no one knows exactly how it started. Some suspected American rebels set it deliberately to deny the British use of the city. Others blamed accident or misfortune. Whatever the cause, the fire left thousands homeless and scarred the city for decades. Imagine the sight, a smoking ruin, its wooden houses turned to ash, its population in despair. New York was occupied, burned, and divided. Yet the city endured. When the war ended in 1783, British forces evacuated. George Washington himself entered the city in triumph on November 25th, a day remembered as Evacuation Day. The American flag was raised over Fort George, and New Yorkers celebrated freedom. But the scars of war, fire, and occupation were everywhere. The city had to rebuild itself almost from the ground up. In 1789, a remarkable moment cemented New York's place in history. For a brief time, it became the first capital of the United States under the new Constitution. At Federal Hall on Wall Street, George Washington took the oath of office as the nation's first president. Picture the scene: crowds filling Broad Street, Washington's solemn face as he swore to uphold the Constitution, the roar of celebration. New York was not only a city reborn, it was the birthplace of a nation's government. Though the capital soon moved to Philadelphia and later Washington, D.C., the city's role in shaping the young republic was unforgettable. Its port made it vital to the economy, its diversity gave it a distinct voice, and its resilience in the face of war and fire made it a symbol of survival.
The 19th century would transform New York yet again. In 1825, the opening of the Erie Canal changed everything. This engineering marvel connected the Hudson River to the Great Lakes, opening vast new markets in the American interior. Suddenly, goods could flow from the Midwest through New York to the Atlantic, and the city exploded in wealth and importance. Its port became the busiest in the United States, surpassing all rivals. Immigrants came in waves. The Irish fled famine in the 1840s, filling crowded tenements and working dangerous jobs. Germans arrived after failed revolutions, bringing new ideas, foods, and traditions. Italians, Poles, Russians, and Jews followed later, each carving out neighborhoods and communities. By 1900, more than 80% of New York's residents were either immigrants or the children of immigrants. The city was a mosaic, noisy and chaotic, but alive with energy. This growth was not without struggle. Poverty was rampant in neighborhoods like Five Points, where gangs fought bloody battles in the streets. Fires and epidemics tore through the overcrowded tenements. Corruption flourished in city politics, epitomized by Tammany Hall and figures like Boss Tweed. Yet from this chaos emerged resilience. The city was learning how to survive its own contradictions. During the Civil War, New York's divisions once again surfaced. The city's economy was tied to Southern cotton, and many feared that emancipation would ruin their trade. While thousands of New Yorkers enlisted to fight for the Union, anti-war sentiment ran high. In 1863, anger over the military draft exploded into the draft riots, 5 days of terror in which mobs rampaged through the streets, attacking black residents, looting homes, and battling police and soldiers. Over 100 people were killed, and the city was shaken to its core. Yet, even in this dark moment, New York found ways to grow. Central Park was built, offering green space for rich and poor alike. The Brooklyn Bridge began to rise, a marvel of engineering that would link Manhattan to Brooklyn and symbolize the city's ambition. Skyscrapers started to climb toward the clouds, reshaping the skyline forever. By the late 1800s, New York was no longer just a colonial town or a divided city of war. It was becoming a metropolis, a place of industry, finance, culture, and dreams. Its population soared into the millions. Its docks hummed with activity day and night. Its streets pulsed with life from every corner of the globe. New York had been burned, occupied, and torn by violence. But each time it had risen again, stronger and more determined. The foundations were laid for what would come next, the birth of the modern city, a place that would soon be called the capital of the world. At the dawn of the 20th century, New York had already endured centuries of transformation. It had been Lenape homeland, Dutch trading post, English colony, revolutionary battleground, immigrant haven, and industrial powerhouse. But the modern age was about to push the city into something far greater. By 1900, New York was not just an American city. It was on the verge of becoming the center of the world. The numbers alone were staggering. In 1898, the 5 boroughs, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, and Staten Island, were officially consolidated into one city. Overnight, New York became the largest municipality in the United States. Its population surged past 3 million and would double again within a generation. The consolidation was more than bureaucratic. It was symbolic. The scattered communities of Greater New York were now one, united under the banner of ambition. The harbor was the city's beating heart. Each year, millions of tons of goods passed through its docks. But it wasn't only cargo, it was people. Ellis Island opened in 1892, and for the next 60 decades, more than 12 million immigrants would pass through its gates. Italians arrived by the hundreds of thousands, fleeing poverty in Sicily and southern Italy. Eastern European Jews fled pogroms and persecution. Poles, Hungarians, Greeks, and countless others followed. Each carried dreams, and each reshaped the city. Walk through New York in 1910, and you would see a world condensed into one place. Little Italy bustled with markets and parades. The Lower East Side was packed with Yiddish theaters, kosher delis, and pushcarts selling goods in half a dozen languages. Chinatown grew with shops, laundries, and associations. Harlem became home to African Americans migrating from the South, along with immigrants from the Caribbean. The city was a mosaic, and while tensions simmered between groups, the overall effect was revolutionary. New York was becoming the most diverse city in human history. But this rapid growth also came with pain. Tenements were overcrowded, dark, and unsanitary. Families packed into single rooms with no running water. Disease spread quickly. Child labor was common, with boys and girls working long hours in sweatshops.
The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire of 1911 revealed the human cost of industrial growth. When flames swept through the garment factory, 146 workers, mostly young immigrant women, died, many leaping from windows to escape the inferno. The tragedy shocked the nation and spurred reforms in workplace safety and labor rights. Out of ashes came change, a recurring theme in New York's story. Even amid hardship, culture flourished. The early 20th century saw the birth of Broadway as the global stage. Theaters filled with vaudeville acts, musicals, and dramas that drew audiences from around the world. The city's newspapers, led by giants like Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst, fought circulation wars that shaped modern journalism. Wall Street boomed, its canyons of finance symbolizing both opportunity and risk.
Then came the Harlem Renaissance. In the 1920s, Harlem became the cultural capital of Black America. Writers like Langston Hughes, musicians like Duke Ellington, and thinkers like Zora Neale Hurston created a wave of art, music, and literature that redefined American culture. Jazz filled the clubs, poetry filled the pages, and a new sense of pride filled the streets. Harlem's energy was not confined to its borders. It influenced the entire nation and beyond, cementing New York's place as a cultural powerhouse. The city's skyline told its own story. The Woolworth Building rose in 1913, once the tallest in the world. Then came the Chrysler Building in 1930, its Art Deco spire gleaming like a crown. Just a year later, the Empire State Building pierced the clouds, a symbol of ambition during the depths of the Great Depression. Each new skyscraper was not just a building. It was a declaration. New York would always rise higher. Yet, New York was also a place of extremes. The 1920s brought wealth to some, but left many struggling. The stock market crash of 1929 hit the city hard. Banks failed, unemployment soared, and breadlines stretched around blocks. Hoovervilles, shantytowns of the homeless, appeared in parks and under bridges. Still, the city endured. Public works projects created jobs, and the spirit of resilience carried New Yorkers forward. World War II transformed the city once more. Its factories produced ships, weapons, and supplies. Its harbor became a lifeline for the Allied war effort. Troops marched down its avenues before heading overseas. Immigrants once marginalized became essential to the workforce. The war years also reinforced New York's position as a global city. When the United Nations was founded in 1945, its permanent headquarters was built in Manhattan. New York was no longer just an American city. It was now the stage for international diplomacy. The post-war years brought prosperity, but also change. Suburbanization drew middle-class families away from the city, while new waves of immigrants continued to arrive. Puerto Ricans migrated in huge numbers, reshaping neighborhoods with their language, food, and culture. Later, Dominicans, Chinese, Koreans, and South Asians followed, adding more layers to the city's identity. By the late 20th century, New York was home to people from every nation on Earth. But the city also faced crises. In the 1970s, crime soared, the economy faltered, and New York teetered on the edge of bankruptcy. Blackouts led to riots, abandoned buildings scarred neighborhoods. The once great metropolis seemed to be collapsing. Yet even then, creativity thrived. Hip-hop was born in the Bronx. Punk rock found its voice in downtown clubs. Artists and writers turned struggle into expression. Out of decline, New York reinvented itself again. The city's resilience was tested once more on September 11, 2001. Terrorists attacked the World Trade Center, destroying the Twin Towers and killing nearly 3,000 people. The skyline was shattered, and the world watched in grief. But New Yorkers responded with courage. Firefighters, police officers, and ordinary citizens became heroes. In the aftermath, the city mourned, rebuilt, and refused to bow to fear. The new One World Trade Center now stands as both memorial and symbol of resilience. Today, New York is the largest city in the United States, with over 8 million residents and more than 20 million in its metropolitan area. It is the financial capital of the world, home to the United Nations, and a global center of culture, fashion, media, and innovation. Its subways rumble 24 hours a day. Its skyline is recognized everywhere. Its energy is unmatched. But what truly makes New York extraordinary is not its size or wealth, it is its spirit. The city has always been a place of survival and reinvention. It has burned, been occupied, faced riots, disasters, and terror. And each time it has risen stronger. From the Lenape to the Dutch, from immigrants at Ellis Island to refugees today, New York has always been defined by diversity. It thrives not because it is one thing, but because it is everything. Here lies the secret. New York has never belonged to one empire, one people, or one era. It has always been a city of the world, shaped by those who arrived with nothing and built something greater. That is why it became the capital of the world. So when you walk through Times Square, cross the Brooklyn Bridge, or ride the subway beneath the streets, remember, you are not just in a city. You are standing on centuries of survival, ambition, and rebirth. Every stone, every street, every skyscraper tells a story, and the story of New York is the story of humanity's greatest experiment in living together, against all odds, in one restless, resilient place.